Let's come back to that verse, Luke chapter 22, verse 26, following 25 and 26. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. This is absolutely unheard of. Which leader thinks of leadership this way? He mentions two things here. Jesus mentions two things. And the first one is becoming the youngest. Becoming the youngest. What does it mean that we need to become like the youngest in terms of greatness and leadership? When the disciples were clamoring to be the comparative greatest, Jesus cautioned them and told them that they need to be the comparative youngest. Now, there are many verses in Scripture that talk about pride and humility. And we know that pride is bad, humility is good. God detests the proud but gives grace to the humble. Pride goes before a fall. And then there are other verses that talk about us trying to be humble. We need to be humble. So let's read one of them. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6. It says, humble yourselves therefore under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Humble yourself. We know that humility is good. We know that God can humble us, which he does all the time. But this verse says, humble yourselves. Let me ask a question. How? How do we humble ourselves? Do we wear ragged clothes? Or walk with our head down, or eat something simple for dinner, or talk in a soft voice? How do we humble ourselves? There may be many ways, but I think this verse has one of the ways. It says here, let the greatest among you become as the youngest. Let the greatest among you become as the youngest. In Eastern cultures and in ancient cultures like the one Jesus was in, age determined rank. Age determined rank. So you could be older, not necessarily smarter, but because you were older, you had more rank. You had more authority simply because of your age. In my parents' house, in my dad's house and mom's house, they have 8 and 9 siblings. The oldest sibling holds that position of authority, while the youngest sibling has no position of authority. There is a huge difference between them. So in a large family get-together, if you were the youngest kid of the youngest sibling, you had nothing going on for you. Because the youngest person had no respect, no rights, no status. And that is how it was in that culture. The youngest had no respect, rights, or status. So bringing or thinking yourself, even though you are great in terms of the world's eyes, thinking yourself as the youngest is thinking in terms of having no respect, rights, or status. What does this look like? What does this look like for a person to give up his respect, his rights, and his status? We don't need to look too far, because we can look at Jesus and see how he gave it up. In Max Lucado's book, When God Whispers Your Name, he writes, I think it's noteworthy that the Almighty didn't act high and mighty. The Holy One wasn't holier than thou. The one who knew it all wasn't a know-it-all. The one who made the stars didn't keep his head in them. The one who owns all the stuff of earth never strutted it. His purpose was not to show off, but to show up. He went to great pains to be as human as the guy down the street. He did not need to study, but he still went to the synagogue. He had no need for income, but still worked in the workshop. He had known the fellowship of angels and had heard the harps of heaven, yet still went to parties thrown by tax collectors. And upon his shoulders rested the challenge of redeeming creation, but he still took time to walk 90 miles from Jericho to Cana to attend a wedding. They called him a blasphemer, but they never called him a braggart. They accused him of heresy, but never arrogance. He was branded as a radical, but never called unapproachable. Jesus became like the youngest, without respect, rights, or status. What would it look for us to become like the youngest? Obviously, it depends on our temperaments. But let me give you some ideas just to start the process for us to think like the youngest, no matter what our status is, no matter what our rank is, no matter what our respect is, to think like the youngest. If we were thinking like the youngest, we would not give our opinion for everything. If we are thinking like the youngest when another person's spiritual trajectory looks different than mine, I would not try to change it. If we are thinking like the youngest, if somebody else's experience is different than mine, I would not judge it. If I'm thinking like the youngest on all matters, including spiritual matters, I can afford to be ignorant, which is, I don't have to be an expert in everything. Sometimes we try to be experts, even in fields that we are supposed to be experts in. But if I'm like the youngest, I can allow for ignorance. I don't need to pretend like I know the whole Bible. I don't need to pretend like I'm the most experienced. And we can remind ourselves that we are not owed anything by anybody. Essentially, by humbling ourselves, we are acknowledging that human opinion doesn't matter. Human opinion, including my own opinion about myself, doesn't matter. Human opinion is fickle, it is not comprehensive, it is not accurate, and it can change at any time. So we are acknowledging that the only opinion that really matters about us is the opinion of God. Nobody knows about a fickle human opinion than Jesus. And he will tell you that the people who celebrate you today may ask for your crucifixion before the week is done.